The room burst into applause as I stepped onto the stage, the lights flashing across my chest, catching the glint of my silver key necklace. Our CEO lifted his glass high, voice booming through the speakers. "If Scalar pulls off this project, we'll double her salary and promote her to director. Mark my words!" I smiled, heart hammering, thinking, this was it. Have you ever been promised something so grand, so publicly, that you thought, finally, someone sees me, only to realize later it was all smoke and mirrors? Stick around until the end. I promise you, the way I fought back will be worth every second you spend here. 7 months earlier, if you had told me I'd be standing there, center stage, I would have laughed. I was just another senior analyst tucked into a gray cubicle, building predictive models no one wanted to pay attention to. Until one day, the opportunity slammed into my lap like a freight train. The company had a chance to pitch a groundbreaking AI system to Titan Corp, one of the largest multinational giants in consumer technology. If we won the deal, it would mean $20 million over 5 years, unprecedented in our company's history. But there was a catch. The project needed to be ready for prototype in just 6 months. 6 months. For something that normally took 2 years. No senior executive wanted to touch it. It was a guaranteed career death sentence if it failed. That's when Mr. Haynes, our CEO, called me into his glass office. I still remember how he leaned back in his leather chair, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against his teeth. "You've always been underestimated, Scalar," he said with a sly grin. "How would you like to prove everyone wrong?" I didn't blink, didn't hesitate. I said yes. And now, here I was, 7 months later, standing under blinding lights at the company's anniversary gala. The AI project hadn't just worked. It had blown Titan Corp away. Our demo beat out 2 Fortune 500 competitors. We signed the contract that afternoon. When Mr. Haynes grabbed the microphone during the gala, his voice was thick with excitement. He praised the company's spirit of innovation, but then, to everyone's surprise, he pointed at me. "There's someone who embodies that spirit more than anyone else. Scalar Andrews." He called me forward. I clutched the tiny key around my neck, a gift from my mother when I graduated college, with trembling fingers. "If Scalar succeeds," he said, voice rising over the crowd, "I will personally double her salary, and she will take her rightful place among our leadership team." The audience erupted. People patted my back. Some even whistled. My boss winked at me from his table. For the first time in my career, I felt undeniable. Seen, respected, valued. I closed my eyes for a moment and thought about everything I could finally do. Pay off my mom's medical bills, buy a real house, maybe even take a vacation somewhere that didn't involve a Motel 6. The key at my throat felt heavy, like a promise. One I believed he would honor. I had no idea then how badly I was about to be wrong. The next morning, I walked into the office with a different kind of energy humming under my skin. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. For the first time, I had visible proof that hard work, not politics, could carve a real path forward. Colleagues greeted me differently. Some smiled wider than usual. Some gave me nods of respect they'd never bothered with before. Even my direct manager, Jillian, who used to barely acknowledge me in meetings, stopped by my desk. "Big things ahead, Scalar," she said with a wink. I tried to stay grounded, but I couldn't help the small surge of hope blooming inside me. Maybe this was really happening. Maybe everything my mother had taught me about patience, perseverance, and trusting my own worth wasn't just wishful thinking. A few days later, I received a calendar invite titled Post-Project Recognition Meeting, Executive Team plus Scalar. I stared at the subject line for a full minute, my heart skipping. This was it, the official meeting where they would finalize the raise, the promotion, the future I had fought tooth and nail to earn. I spent the weekend preparing. I organized every metric, every deliverable, every piece of tangible value I had contributed to the AI project. I printed out success charts showing how our model had slashed costs by 37% and boosted projected customer engagement by 49%. I even included feedback from Titan Corp executives, specifically mentioning my leadership and innovation. By Sunday night, my apartment was covered in color-coded folders and highlighters. The silver key around my neck thudded gently against my chest with every step, like a steady drumbeat reminding me, "You're ready." But Monday morning, strange things started happening. When I walked into the building, there was no congratulations banner, no welcome committee, just the usual gray walls, the usual indifferent security guard nodding as I flashed my badge. Jillian barely glanced up from her computer when I passed by. The few colleagues who had cheered the loudest at the gala now avoided eye contact, suddenly absorbed in their screens or fake phone calls. A knot started forming in my stomach. In the elevator ride up to the executive floor, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. The sharp black blazer, the neat hair, the calm, determined face. But underneath the polish, a seed of doubt was starting to sprout. "Stay focused," I told myself. "You earned this. You heard the promise with your own ears, in front of the whole company." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The executive conference room was sterile as ever. Long, polished table, leather chairs, a faint smell of fresh coffee and floor cleaner. Mr. Haynes was already there, lounging back in his chair, scrolling on his phone like this was just another Monday. A few other executives trickled in, murmuring greetings without warmth. I set my folders down neatly, took a breath, and smiled. "Good morning," I said, voice even. No one smiled back. Instead, Mr. Haynes looked up at me with a strange glint in his eyes, something between amusement and indifference. "Let's get started," he said briskly. I sat down, the key around my neck suddenly feeling heavier than ever. I waited, shoulders squared, my documents neatly stacked in front of me. The room settled into an uneasy stillness. Mr. Haynes tapped the table lightly with his pen, a rhythmic, almost mocking beat. "First of all," he said, clearing his throat, "congratulations to the entire team on the Titan Corp success. It was a real group effort." Group effort? I blinked, confusion prickling at the edges of my brain. "In the spirit of teamwork," he continued, his voice smooth like glass, "we've decided that all contributors will receive a token of appreciation, a little something to celebrate this collective victory." He reached under the table and pulled out a stack of glossy envelopes. One by one, executives took them, smiling faintly as if this were a kindergarten award ceremony. When he slid one across the table to me, I hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a 5-day voucher for a mid-tier Caribbean cruise. No salary adjustment, no promotion, no director title. Not even a one-on-one conversation to acknowledge what I had sacrificed for the company. Just a voucher. The same as everyone else. The same as people who had only touched the project for 5 minutes. I looked up at Mr. Haynes, my throat dry. He gave a lazy smile, tapping the envelope in my hands. "I trust you'll enjoy the break. You deserve some rest after all that." Intensity. The other executives chuckled politely, already gathering their things, ready to move on. No one looked at me directly. I sat frozen as the room emptied out, my hands trembling slightly. Around me, chairs scraped against the floor, paper shuffling, muted footsteps disappearing down the hallway. And in the lingering silence, I heard it. 2 junior executives whispering as they passed the glass wall. Poor girl really thought she'd make director. Well, it's not like they'd hand that kind of power to just anyone, especially not to her. The words sliced through me, sharper than any knife. Not to her. I gathered my folders slowly, methodically, willing my face to stay neutral. No emotion, no weakness. The silver key at my neck burned against my skin, suddenly feeling like a cruel joke instead of a promise. Have you ever been blindsided so completely, after giving your all, that you didn't even have words left to defend yourself? A moment when you realized the rules you played by didn't apply to everyone else? If you've ever stood silent while the ground crumbled under you, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. Because you're not alone, and you deserve to be heard. That afternoon, I walked past Jillian's desk. She didn't even glance up. I passed the break room, where the Titan Corp success party had started. Balloons, cake, forced laughter echoing down the hallways. Someone offered me a paper plate with a sliver of cake. I declined. Everywhere I looked, the truth stared back at me. The celebration wasn't for me. It was for the image. The illusion that everyone mattered equally. But some of us were never meant to rise beyond a certain invisible ceiling, not because we weren't good enough, but because we were never meant to be given the key to the real door. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I unclasped the key necklace and stared at it in my palm. I thought about my mother, how she worked 2 jobs and still managed to smile every night when she got home, how she told me to work hard, to stay true, to believe that merit would be rewarded. Was she wrong? Was I foolish? No. The problem wasn't with the key. The problem was believing I had to wait for someone else to grant me the right to use it. That's when the idea took root. Quiet but powerful. If they wouldn't open the door, I'd build my own damn door. And this time, I wouldn't ask for permission. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. No alarm, no snoozing. It was like my body already knew. The game had changed. I sat on the edge of my bed, the silver key resting cold against my skin, and made myself a quiet promise. No more chasing empty words. No more waiting for someone else to validate my worth. If the door wasn't going to open, I would find another way through the wall. At the office, I moved like a ghost, present but invisible. They thought they had beaten me into silence. They thought I would either quit out of shame or slink back to my corner like a scolded child. They had no idea what was coming. I began collecting everything. Every email that hinted at my original assignment to lead the Titan Corp project. Every internal memo where my contributions were documented. Every thank you note from executives, clients, even Titan Corp themselves. I combed through archives late into the night, forwarding copies to a secure, private drive only I could access, and I wasn't sloppy about it. I followed protocol so tightly that not even the IT department could question what I was doing. If they wanted a fight, I would build my case brick by brick, but not in rage, not in public, not on their terms. At the same time, I reached out, quietly, strategically. Lunches with department heads, coffee chats with mid-level managers, polite check-ins with Titan Corp liaisons. Always friendly, always professional. But under the surface, I was mapping the real power dynamics inside and outside the company. It turned out, a lot of people weren't thrilled with how Mr. Haynes had handled things. Some were just too scared to say it out loud. Some were quietly looking for an exit too. And Titan Corp? They were beyond impressed with the AI system I had built. In their eyes, I wasn't just a contributor. I was the reason they signed the contract. More importantly, they trusted me, not the company name on my business card. I didn't make any sudden moves. I didn't rage quit. I didn't send angry emails. I didn't burn bridges. At least not yet. I just worked. Quietly, efficiently, flawlessly. And all the while, I was laying the groundwork for something bigger than they could imagine. A few weeks later, during a vendor networking event, I accidentally bumped into an executive from one of our top competitors. We exchanged cards, then emails, then coffee meetings. I never once mentioned my situation. I let my reputation, my results, speak for itself. Every time I felt the sting of being ignored, overlooked, patronized in meetings, I touched the key at my throat and reminded myself, no one is coming to save you, but you are more powerful than they will ever understand. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't beg. I rebuilt myself in silence, fueled not by bitterness, but by strategy. Because real revenge isn't about screaming the loudest. It's about winning so thoroughly that by the time they realize what happened, it's already too late. And I was just getting started. It started with a whisper. One morning, I overheard two marketing managers in the hallway speaking in hushed tones. Did you hear? Titan Corp might be pulling back. Over leadership concerns, apparently. My ears pricked up immediately. Leadership concerns. I said nothing, just kept walking as if I hadn't heard a thing. But inside, a slow, steady flame began to grow. Titan Corp wasn't stupid. They had seen the internal dynamics for what they were, and they were beginning to act. I just needed to nudge the dominoes a little harder. Around that time, an anonymous article surfaced on an industry forum. It was titled, "The Cost of Breaking Promises: When Companies Undermine Their Own Talent." The piece was razor sharp. It didn't name my company directly, but it didn't have to. Anyone familiar with the Titan Corp deal could read between the lines. The article detailed how mid-level contributors, particularly women, were often used as pawns, celebrated publicly, and discarded privately once the real money was secured. It spoke about broken promises, crushed morale, and the long-term damage to corporate reputations when integrity was treated like an optional accessory. The article went viral within a week. Employees whispered in the hallways. Slack channels buzzed with speculation. Even clients started asking pointed questions during meetings. I didn't write the article, but I knew exactly who had fed the journalist the inside story, and exactly how carefully the information had been curated. I wasn't just fighting back. I was changing the battlefield itself. Then came the real blow. Titan Corp sent a formal letter to our executive team. They requested a leadership meeting to reassess the strategic partnership before finalizing the second phase of the contract. Translation: they were putting our entire $20 million deal under review, and they made it clear they wanted to meet with the actual project lead. Me, not Mr. Haynes, not the appointed director of innovation who had barely touched the AI system. Me. The message spread through the office like wildfire. Suddenly, the same executives who had ignored me for weeks were checking in at my desk, inviting me to coffee, asking if I needed support, preparing for the meeting. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so insulting. Where were they when I sat alone after that conference room betrayal? Where were they when the vouchers were handed out like cheap party favors? They didn't care about me. They cared about salvaging the money. The day before the scheduled meeting with Titan Corp, Mr. Haynes called me into his office. He smiled tightly, gesturing for me to sit. "Scalar," he began, "we've had some time to reflect." He spoke in circles, praising my tenacity, acknowledging that perhaps certain rewards had been delayed unfairly. And then came the offer. A modest raise. A new title. Senior Project Manager. A public statement recognizing my contributions to Titan Corp. A consolation prize. A scramble to patch the sinking ship. I listened politely, hands folded in my lap, the key necklace warm against my chest. When he finished, I smiled sweetly. "I appreciate the gesture," I said, "but I already have other plans." The flash of confusion and then anger on his face was almost worth the months of humiliation. Almost. The next day, I walked into the Titan Corp boardroom not as a victim, but as a force. Their senior executives greeted me warmly, offering genuine smiles and handshakes. They asked insightful questions about the AI model, about future scalability, about optimization strategies, real intelligent engagement, not empty politicking. By the end of the meeting, the Titan Corp VP leaned forward and said, very deliberately, "Scalar, we trust you to lead us through the next 5 years. Wherever you go, we want to follow." It wasn't a negotiation, it was a declaration, and I knew in that moment that I held the power Mr. Haynes thought he had stolen from me. Within a week, Titan Corp formally requested to renegotiate the contract terms, conditional upon leadership changes. When the news broke internally, the office descended into quiet chaos, hushed meetings, frantic strategy sessions behind closed doors, rumors of board interventions. Meanwhile, I quietly submitted my resignation letter. Effective immediately. No drama, no farewell parties, just a clean break. I had already accepted a senior executive offer from a direct competitor, at a salary nearly triple what Mr. Haynes had promised, and never delivered. And better yet, Titan Corp was eager to move their business over with me. The house of cards Mr. Haynes had built was crumbling, and I hadn't even needed to push. All I did was stand still and let the truth do its work. I didn't announce my departure. I didn't blast an emotional goodbye email to the company. I didn't even post a cryptic LinkedIn update. I simply walked out of the building one afternoon with a small box of personal items tucked under my arm and the silver key swinging lightly against my chest. No fanfare, no last-minute negotiations, no regrets, just freedom. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already too late. 3 days after I left, Titan Corp made their final move. They issued a formal notice terminating the $20 million partnership, citing leadership instability and ethical misalignment. The blow was catastrophic. Revenue forecasts plummeted overnight. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. Internal Slack channels melted down with speculation and finger-pointing. And Mr. Haynes? He vanished. Rumors said he was taking personal time. Others whispered about a board investigation into misconduct, not just related to me, but other buried complaints that my quiet rebellion had helped bring to light. The company tried desperately to spin the story, talking about new beginnings, fresh visions, and exciting leadership transitions. But the industry wasn't fooled. The damage was permanent. No one trusted a company that celebrated talent in public, only to discard it in private. Meanwhile, my life unfolded like the sunrise after a long, brutal storm. My new role at the competitor company wasn't just a promotion, it was a real seat at the table, a real voice in decisions that mattered. And best of all, Titan Corp came with me. We launched new projects together, pushing innovation further than I ever could have imagined under Mr. Haynes's thumb. For the first time, my work wasn't hidden behind someone else's name. My contributions were seen, valued, and rewarded. And the silver key at my throat? It no longer felt heavy with broken promises. It felt like what it was always meant to be, a reminder that I had unlocked my own future with no permission needed. One afternoon, several months later, I found myself standing across the street from my old company's headquarters. The once busy building now looked faded. The logo had been stripped from the glass facade. The lobby sat dark and empty. I stood there for a long moment, hand curled loosely around the key necklace. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, steady pride. They had tried to shrink me, ignore me, betray me. But in the end, they had only made me stronger. They had handed me the very lessons I needed to stop asking, stop waiting, and start becoming. And I had become more than they ever thought possible. It was a crisp fall morning when I returned to that street corner for the last time. The cold air nipped at my skin, but I barely noticed. Across the road, the old building stood like a hollowed-out monument to broken promises. The corporate flags had been stripped from the poles. The once bustling glass lobby was dark, abandoned. Only the faint outline of the company's name remained on the facade, a ghost of what used to be. I pulled my coat tighter around me and smiled, the silver key at my throat catching a sliver of sunlight. It didn't hurt to see it like this. It didn't stir anger or sadness, only a quiet certainty. They had built their kingdom on sand. And when the tides turned, it crumbled, because it had no foundation worth saving. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a calendar reminder for my first major leadership summit as an executive. I was scheduled to give the keynote address, speaking about innovation, integrity, and the future of AI. 500 industry leaders would be in that audience. People who had once ignored me, people who now asked for my opinion. People who had finally learned what Mr. Haynes never did. You can't suppress real value. You can't bury real talent forever. It always finds a way to rise, louder, brighter, stronger. I took one last look at the empty building, then turned away, walking toward my future without a single glance back. If life has taught me anything, it's this. Never mistake someone's silence for weakness. Never assume that because someone doesn't fight loud, they aren't fighting at all. Sometimes, the strongest battles are waged in quiet corridors. Sometimes, the fiercest revenge is delivered not with words, but with undeniable success. And sometimes, the door they refuse to open for you, it was never the door you were meant to walk through anyway. You were meant to build your own. Have you ever realized, after a betrayal or a setback, that you didn't need their approval, you only needed your own? That the power to rebuild, to rise, to rewrite everything was always yours? If you've ever walked away from a closed door and found yourself on a path brighter than you imagined, I'd love for you to share your story. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be.